Mccall.
And 3, 2, 1, blast off. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Campfire CoWorks Fireside Chats with Firestarters, in which we talk with entrepreneurs, social impact leaders, visionaries, creatives, dreamers of a better world about the things they're doing to build that better world. And I'm here this week with our guests, 3 handsome and wicked smart space nerds and the co-founders of Kall Morris Inc. Before we get started, our traditional shout out to Bang Energy Drinks, fuel your destiny. Appropriately today we've got Star Blast, so you can all take one with you as we blast off. And I will put in a plug that it's lagging. It's lagging. We've got some technical difficulties.
Drink it slowly.
I'll drink it slowly. We're going to put out I'm going to put out the challenge to the CEO of Bang Energy Drinks that he'll get the picture once we talk about what you guys do. But I'm thinking we shoot some of these into space, and they become your first project. You retrieve a bunch of Bang Energy Drinks.
Desperately, please don't.
I feel like we've got enough projects already.
How are we doing on technical over there? The video's lagging. Is the sound all right? All right. Well, I'm going to go on so that, assuming that people are hearing things, we've got a little bit of technical difficulty, as we do every week. This week it's going to be the video, but that's all right, because one of the things about entrepreneurship is MVPs and failure, right?
Yes.
And what we're doing here is an MVP on top of an MVP on top of an MVP, and we add a little bit every time. Anyway, so I will get you guys introduced. We got Adam Kall, Austin Morris, Troy Morris. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. And why don't we start by introducing yourselves, a little bit of backstory, where you're from, your role at KMI or Kall Morris Incorporated, and a little bit of personal insight, maybe your favorite episode of the Big Bang theory, or your favorite midnight snack, whatever it might be.
Okay, well, starting with me, so Adam Mccall. I'm originally from Iowa, Davenport, Iowa, and came up here for Northern Michigan University and met these two while there. Got my degrees in math and computer science, and then on to a master's in data science. I'm already forgetting the other questions, but
it was more. That's enough.
Enough.
You don't have to know all the questions. They were kind of goofs anyway. Favorite episode of the Big Bang Theory? Right? No. Go ahead and give us your background.
Yeah, Austin Morris. I'm from Illinois originally, Northern Illinois, a little outside Chicago. Troy will ferry onto that as well. But came up like Adam, came up to Marquette to go to NMU. Got my degree in mechanical engineering technology, spent some time working in industry, and made our way to this funny idea of ours to work on the problem of space debris. So I serve as the Director of Engineering for KMI, and I'll pass it off to Troy.
And then I'm the Director of Operations. Adam missed, but he's the Director of Technology. He's better with the ones and zeros. But I'm Troy. I graduated from Northern Michigan University with my degree in psychology, behavior analysis. Then went and worked out in corporations, and I got a phone call from my little brother's college roommate, and they had this little idea, and we're looking at it, and we're like, I don't know if it'd work, but let's have some calls, let's work it out. And it went from a back of a napkin to the front of a napkin to a full-fledged business that we are working with numerous partners, and it's crazy and exciting, but it's interesting to see how far it's come already.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we've been talking about this for about a year, and I've seen you guys progress really, really incredibly well. So I guess we can say right up front, you are fire starters of a completely different ilk when it comes to who we normally have on this show, because you are taking on, when it comes to solving big problems, you decided to go really big. And give us a quick synopsis of what Kall Morris is out to do. What's the company all about? And I don't know who takes that first, but you want to take that one?
So the basic idea is that there are objects that have been launched into space since Sputnik, and that's great. The problem is a lot of those objects are still there, so as we want to put new things up there, they're impacting, sometimes catastrophically and other times just a hazard of interacting. So the real idea of what KMI is looking to do is to go into space in an economical, repeatable way, retrieve pieces of orbital debris and control it so that humans all over the world can continue to enjoy everything above our heads. So that's really the idea, is go retrieve space debris and do it again and again and again so that we can continue to rely on outer space and all that it gives us.
Got it. So you're basically a space tech company then?
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense then, being a space tech company and a bunch of really smart dudes, that you would move to Marquette, Michigan, which is the clear and obvious space tech capital of the world, right? But seriously, why Marquette? Why would you take this vision, particularly back to Marquette, Michigan?
I think a big thing about the move up here reflects on the company culture we're trying to have, which is to not treat it as what was the way it was done 30 years ago, to look at what's the way it's going to be done tomorrow. And when we looked at Marquette, we realized that like the best place for an aerospace company is no longer in California, Florida, or Texas, because that's where they already are. And it's crowded and it's busy and going to spend a lot of money just trying to keep your head above water. But Marquette's up and coming, where we have the Michigan Launch Initiative. Even before that was announced, there's a lot of attention towards the state of Michigan as all this expertise that was previously pointed only at the automotive sector moving and shifting. And what if one of those directions is aerospace? So we saw a great potential and we said, let's be a part of that. Let's not just follow the crowd, let's be the crowd.
That's great. And that is one of the, I mean, you point out the auto industry. A little known fact that I didn't realize until I met you guys and started doing a little bit of research was that Michigan is actually like number 4 when it comes to aerospace manufacturing. If you look at all of the different componentry that goes into different parts of aerospace and where they come from, Michigan is very heavy. There's like something like 1,000 manufacturers who supply various pieces of widgets, for lack of a more technical term, to the aerospace industry. And you know, we've seen space tech startups like Atlas Space Operations down in Traverse City, Orbion up in Houghton, Hancock area, that both of which have been very successful and well-funded startups that are putting, in fact, Orbion will have their satellites in space in the next few years, their propulsion systems in space in the next few years. So that's really cool. And how about from an entrepreneurship standpoint in terms of the support that you've found coming back in Michigan, in Marquette? What's that been like for you?
It's been many times over. It was something that there was a definite X factor returning to the site of our alma mater. Plus, you know, we're familiar with the fun places to hang out. The pasties are delicious. Like, there's all those X factors. But one that we didn't account for in our math on it, which was very interesting, is how much of that community support. And here at Campfire, you guys were a huge starting part of that. But some of those introductions to different organizations in the local community or at the state level that have just taken us above and beyond what we thought support would be available. So it's really funny, as none of us are from this state, but we all came here because we knew this is where we'd want to build our business because it's the best shot for it. So a lot of that support from organizations like the Lake Communities Partnership, like you've got the PTAC, you've got SBDC, and numerous other ones. So I apologize to everyone I didn't list.
There's so
but
many. Yeah.
The alphabet soup, to put it bluntly, that just, even when you're like, there's no way, how am I going to, oh, we got a guy for that. How am I going to figure out and fill out this long, oh, we got a girl for that. There's always somebody willing to help. And I think a big part of that is that youperness, that
Yes.
come together in the community, that whether you're on one end of the peninsula or another, we're all in this together.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And innovation happening wherever people want to be is kind of a theme in the world right now. Rather than, hey, I want to be an innovator, I want to lead something, I have to go to X fill in the blank. I think COVID has really brought about an acceleration of that, right? Do you feel like that's accelerated your particular industry in terms of being able to do engineering and space math or whatever the heck you do? You know, I mean, here we are today we're actually took the Campfire to outer space for these gentlemen because they're not really at home in a normal setting. But no, I mean, do you think that that's in your industries in general? Are you seeing that happening more and more?
I think partly yes. You know, there's the last year and change has shown a lot of us that most things that we thought have to happen in certain locations can really be done remotely from anywhere in the world that has connectivity. And for a lot of those pieces and components, yes. For some things, not as much. We were talking about it earlier, how we had this great idea in November 2019 with the way that the economy was going and everything was looking up for space tech. We were like, this is going to be a great time to get into the industry and find some funding. And then we decided to move back and really start things in March of 2020.
That's when we quit our jobs, our good-paying jobs. We thought,
Stable, well-paying jobs, and go for it. And something happened that people may be aware of. COVID kind of locked things down a little bit and shifted the priorities.
Yeah.
So, yes and no.
Yeah.
It's my cop-out answer.
Like you guys, I love a good underdog story, you know, and I also I left in February 28th of 2020. Everything was hot, you know, this is great. It's going to be amazing. and then a month later, we basically had to shut everything down. And it's been up and down since then. But I really do think that timing is super important. And despite that, brick wall that we all hit in a way, in a lot of ways, I think the timing is going to be very, very good for you and for all of us.
And one aspect of that that's been surprising is even with 2020, one of the industries that was least affected by COVID was the aerospace industry. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because these missions are not, oh, we plan it and we're doing it within a year. It's 5 years, 10-year missions. And so I think it was an industry that kind of had to adjust quickly to say, okay, we have to get this work done. We can't afford to put it on pause. We can't afford to change our plans. We need to keep moving forward. And so even though we're just starting out, we kind of picked up on that as well of we can't spend this year sitting at home doing nothing. We have to keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's true. And there was a tendency with what happened with the pandemic for people to sort of freeze and go, oh God, what are we, I mean, I felt it too. And we here at Campfire, we decided that we had to lean into it, and risks be damned. We're gonna fly the plane into the side of the mountain, trying, right?
Yep.
If that's what's going to happen. So let's talk about. You mentioned about the safety of us as humans, basically, when we talk about your motivation. And I think most people understand the idea that of the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution and then the information era. And now we're moving into another kind of transformational time, or maybe we're actually really in the thick of it, where whether you call it the innovation revolution or the post-information age, or you hear Industry 4.0, whatever it may be, there seems to be this really big shift in the arc of humanity right now. And I'd like to know what you guys think about that topic area as entrepreneurs, as space nerds, innovators. How do you think that this shift, this transformation that we're going through as humans relates to what you guys are doing?
I think a big part of it, to take a big picture look, is outside of our field and outside of our instances, is a lot of the democratization of access. We've been on some great virtual sessions this year, and sometimes you'll have an innovator from South Africa doing something with components that they just could not get 5 years ago. Now they click it online and it's at their doorstep. So you've got people that can enter markets they've never been able to, and that does a lot of upheaval in sometimes completely different ways. Pre-COVID, Uber and all the other ride-sharing apps were just completely changing the marketplace of what was done. Is hailing a taxi was the same from 1800 to 1990. Yeah. And then things started to change because people had access. Everyone has a supercomputer in their pocket. Yeah. Anyone can go and buy some of these components and put together and build up their company that does widget X or Y. So I think a lot of that access to both information and resources completely is changing it in that revolution of name to be decided. But I think that is the consistent theme of it, is by having more people from more walks of life come with more ideas, you'll get a history teacher who comes with an idea, is like, well, why have you guys been doing it that way? As we learned from Napoleon, and boom, genius idea that everyone else had just kind of shut the door on.
And I think what you mentioned about being the age of innovation, I would agree with you, which is kind of interesting. Being a space company, you want to call it, oh, the age of space, right? We're all about to go into space and it's about to be a big push. And I don't think we're there yet. But what I think is happening is this age of innovation is pushing an exploration of space. Because in terms of areas that have a lot of problems to be solved that haven't been solved yet, space is really close to that top of the list of there's a lot of things to be done, and that innovative pressure, that innovative energy to do more and to do new things, a lot of attention is being put towards space because suddenly new things are possible.
Yeah. And I think also that it strikes me that one of the reasons space is important, we can think about a lot of problems that we have right here on Earth. Mm-hmm. But also maybe getting off this planet, or at least exploring space to a greater extent than we have, actually has a really direct correlation to how we solve some of those problems on Earth today. So, I mean, talk a little bit about that. How does the issue of space and the importance of solving problems like space debris relate to making life on this planet better and more sustainable?
We all know. Go ahead.
I'm just trying to phrase it because it's so big.
Yeah.
Innovation is really driven by a need for it, right? You need a product, you need a new solution. And what happens a lot of times, my favorite story with space is space provides the need, but the development can then be utilized on Earth in ways we didn't imagine for the need. I know one big discovery was that from building the heat shields on the space shuttle, we got modern tennis shoes. which are not two things you normally correlate. And
Right,
you don't
right.
think, why is a heat shield creating a tennis shoe? But that was what led to it, not because people needed a new shoe or thought they needed a new shoe at the time, but because the technology made it possible. So when we spend money on Earth developing for space, a lot of times smart people come along and say, hey, that development, I can use it over here in this very Earth-based grounded application, but it was funded by a need for it in space. And then, of course, in terms of space debris, you also have how many satellites point at Earth. How many, even though they're up in orbit and they're flying around and they're way outside our atmosphere, they're pointed at Earth. They're doing great work for Earth observation, for GPS, for tracking, for science. So many things that we think of as, oh, that's the space sector. It's like, no, that's your phone sector. That's your television sector.
Yeah.
That's all these other things that you rely on for modern life are also relying on space. So accept it. Let it be part of your infrastructure and see how can we make it even better.
Yeah, and I think there's this thing where sometimes you hear the notion of, well, hey, we've got to have sustainability here on Earth, we've got to stop doing all this space stuff and go back to like a bygone era. And I understand that argument. But I also, we look at the arc of human existence and the 70,000 years that Homo sapiens have been evolving. We never put fire back, once we figured out how to control it. And we don't tend to put our innovations away. We don't put our toys back in the box. And so to some extent, getting off this planet becomes, in the broader scale of human time, an essential thing for the survival long term of our species. I mean, honestly, if we think in space-time, it won't matter to you or I, but it's 6 billion years or so that the sun will be gone.
Yep.
So if human race is going to continue on, we have to get off this planet.
Well, even before that, the Earth has limited resources, which is a strange sentence to say because just 50 years ago, people would have said the Earth is limitless. There's no end to the resources we can pull out of it and the resources available. But like you hear now about the Colorado River, how it doesn't flow to the ocean anymore because we pull the water out of it along the way for sources.
Yeah.
That river is massive if you've ever seen it, and it's hard to imagine it running out. But that's exactly what we've managed to do is take this endless resource and use it.
Yeah.
And that's not a terrible thing. A lot of people have benefited from drinking water out of the Colorado River. I'm not saying that's a bad
Sure.
thing. What I'm saying is that if we're going to continue expanding and continue growing and having better existence, we need to start having an input from outside of Earth. That's the part that really excites me, is not just going into space to stay up there and ignore where we came from, but going into space to bring things back with us, to bring back resources and invention.
And it's not just the physical resources. As you were talking there, Keith, you remind me of Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is a compliment you should take.
Yeah.
And one of them,
I'll take it, absolutely.
And when he's talking about that same question of why should we go, and he kind of turned it back to 70,000 years of why should we leave this cave? What's so great in the next cave or out in the forest? Well, berries or meat, or also the way to make fire or to brew beer or to write written word, or just the discoveries we make along the way. So yes, it's the resources, but also, like Adam said already, some of that technology and processes of water filtration that we can use to turn undrinkable sources. Well, turns out in space, you need water too.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to feedback and solve. If we can fix it in space, it's generally a lot easier on Earth, where less of physics is trying to just brutally murder you. So it really is a challenge of resources and intellect that can we push, can we do, and like you said with fire, bring it back home.
That's right. And I mean, things like comets hold the potential to have many times over the amount of resources that we have here on Earth in terms of precious minerals or in terms of even potentially water, it's hurtling through space.
Just a little mention that I love, gold is a great electrical conductor. We would love to make our power lines out of gold, but we can't because it's gold. It's really expensive and really valuable. A single decent sized asteroid has as much gold as has ever been mined in human history. So imagine bringing back gold, where it's no longer this precious metal that you have to use sparingly and only in jewelry. It's what we use in our electronics, and that makes them better. It makes them run faster and run smarter because we have access to it. That's just one example of many.
Oh, that's great perspective. So shifting gears a little bit, talking about entrepreneurship, you guys are all very smart. You had good jobs, well-paying jobs, as you said. Very stable, right? And you could work at places, and already have worked at places like JetBlue and government institutions like NASA. So what made you want to throw all that away and go and chase the entrepreneurial piece of this? What's the why behind it?
I'll start and throw it to these two because they're the ones who kind of kicked my butt out of the plane. is very much at first was, all right, I'll help you guys, on the weekends and after hours, answering some of the operations questions, business questions. How do you form a corporation? And as time went on, it's this infectious ability to do more. It's this drive that you can control your destiny or do whatever else, but also that you can drive change, and it just lights this fire with you that you have to chase. You can't go after the dimmer fire. So it was something there that just, whatever passion you find, if you can, chase it, whether it's chess or tennis or working with orbital debris.
Yeah.
So that really for me is that it lit that inspiration of tiny Troy at 6 years old playing with his rocket ships of like, oh, we could do that. But also the higher brain clicks too. And once you have both those parts of you, the fire of your soul and your brain saying, there's a business, there's a way we can succeed and make a better planet than we woke up to today, how can you not chase that?
Yeah.
So that's what drew me.
And bringing it back to what you were saying and what Neil deGrasse Tyson said of 70,000 years ago, when somebody says, I wonder what's in that next cave, you're not going to be like, probably not.
Yeah.
So we're working in these well-paying, stable jobs, but thinking of these other things that we could be doing that might be better uses of our time or just different uses of our time, that it's a problem that needs to be solved. It may be by us, it may be by somebody else, but why not by us? And it comes down to that aspect of, I don't know if I might regret making this decision, but I know I'll regret not making this decision.
Yeah.
And that to me was the absolute catalyst of thinking it over in 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, if we reach the singularity and live that long. Will I regret it? Let's find out.
Right.
And to add to that, because I agree on both points, and I'm just adding on top of those reasons. At my previous job, I had worked really hard on a project on innovating a new idea and deployed it. It worked. It was an improvement, but then was told by the powers that be, no, pull it back. That's too new. We don't know how to handle that. We don't quite trust that. Take your innovation back. And I kind of looked at that. I'm like, well, I'm not going to stop innovating. That's just who I am. I like thinking of new things. So I'm just going to put that energy that I know I have towards something else. And it turned out to be an opportunity with some friends from college on a purpose that is really eye-opening. So in addition to really loving the purpose and really loving making Earth a better way, a little bit of spite too. A little bit of just, I'm going to keep innovating.
I love it. I think it's great. And I mean, I commend you guys for coming to that conclusion as early as you did. I came to that conclusion after many years, probably about a decade and a half, of suffering through the recognition that, innovation in established hierarchies is a different thing than innovation in the innovation economy. Innovation where everybody's connected, where people are collaborating instead of competing. Sure, there's going to be competition, but where we're moving, the way that everyone's connected, the results and the outcomes in solving problems are going to be much more powerful when we work together. And when we don't say, the committee said we couldn't do that yet, it's a little too risky. Look at what Elon has been able to accomplish in half the money, half the time, what NASA was able to do in about, 10 years. And so when you let innovation happen and when you unleash the power of innovation and let people that are really smart just give it a shot, that's when some magic happens. So,
and I think you hit a huge string there with the collaboration part, is that innovation of, we just earlier today were talking about a connection someone had made to us to do a type of software that, as great as your degrees are, you had no knowledge of.
Didn't know it existed.
And something that we were going to bash our heads against for hours, he's like, oh no, it's just like this, and it's done. And that's sometimes the key is, it doesn't matter if you make the first automobile. If you don't have wheels, you're not going much anywhere. So it's really all of that working together that I think is just so eye-opening and so exciting outside of that corporate world that we walked away from.
Yeah.
But I think that is going to be such a huge key cornerstone of this innovation market.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's, at every level, across every sector, in every country, we see systems that are no longer working and they're being stretched. And whether that's the public education system, the political system, the central banking system, they're all encountering this incredible dissonance and strain. And I think it's because of these types of things, the dynamics of the innovation revolution and the complexity of the problems we all face are just challenging those old school ways of doing things. And so if you're out there in the corporate world with a little bit of a spark, quit your job. That's what I think. Seriously,
In the middle of a pandemic.
That's my new, in the middle of a pandemic, whatever. Right before a pandemic, I'm thinking that the world actually needs more people who are willing to go, this isn't working. This isn't working, and we've got to do something different. So I really do admire the fact that you guys cottoned onto that early and went for it.
Also adding to what wasn't working is we were all living in big cities at the time.
Yeah.
So I'll say if you're working a corporate job and you're in a big city, don't quit your job right away because it's very expensive living in a big city.
It's cheaper here. Quit your job, move here.
Right.
That's a big part of it. It doesn't have to be Marquette, but there's something to be said for finding the place that you can be the best you, not the place that everyone says things are happening. It's so weird to me when people say move to this city and that's where things happen. It's like, no, you're the one who makes things happen.
Yeah.
You're the innovator, so you decide what city it's going to happen in. Yes, collaboration is very important. This pandemic has shown us it's not about the city you're in, it's about the community you're in and the campfire you're around.
And it's about passion, right? It's about, I mean, innovation thrives in the hearts of people who are passionate about what they're doing and who are creative and who are free to explore the things that really call to them. So yeah, I mean, I think this world where we can in fact go to a place and be with people that we want to be, whether that's in nature or in the city, you know, that's where you're going to thrive and some of your best innovation will come about. You guys talk a lot about first principles when you talk about innovation, and I admit I've seen that, heard it on space shows before, but I don't really know what that comes down to. I mean, I understand the basis of first principles thinking, but tell us a little bit about what that means to you, and how does first principle philosophy lead you to solutions to problems?
So I'll answer this, but I'll definitely toss it to you guys too. It starts with a really scientific thinking of not assuming something just because you were told that's the way it is, and really saying, can I validate that? Which is all the more important in an age where misinformation is all about, is you look at information and say, can I validate that? And thinking from first principles is when someone says what's possible, you say, can I validate that? And the test in deciding helps you see, is that all that's possible, or is there a bit more available to us now? And that's something amazing that when you start hearing everyone around you and everyone, even those not in the field, acknowledge something, that information is probably 20 to 30 years old at that point. It only gets out to the whole population once it's really matured. So don't look at what everyone knows, look at what's up and coming. What is the newest thing going on, and decide, okay, with that information, is it still just that level of what's possible, or have we expanded the level, and do we know where the ceiling is? Or has this now been blown completely open where we don't know where the top is? Let's keep going. Let's see how far we can go.
Yeah, I mean, first principles is why we ended up back here in Marquette, right? Of people say that, you know, you should start a space business in Texas or California or Florida or wherever else. And we're like, but has anybody tried starting one in Marquette? Let's try it.
Yeah.
Let's see how it goes. Let's do the research, do the experiment, find out how it goes.
Yeah.
We'll see, you know, and not taking that at face value, but doing the test to validate it.
The first thing we did after registering a company in Michigan is see, how do we change the state of our company? Because we said that it might not work. We might decide that Michigan can't be our home, so we need to have the plan if the experiment fails. But in performing the experiment, we land in the middle of a community which has more than been worth the move, and it turned out to be, yes, this is where we should be.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And I think it's more and more important to have an awareness of first principles mentality in a world that is so hyper-connected and so media dominant that we can start to believe that, you know, hey, well, that'll never work. Well, it'll never work because I saw it on every single magazine article and Facebook post was saying that you can't do that, so can't do that. There's no way we can get to space, grab a piece of junk and bring it to a safe zone. You know, we just have to let it fill up with junk. Or there's no way we can, Elon Musk used an example of the horse, you know, transitioning to the automobile, the internal combustion engine. Well, there's no way we could ever come up with enough gas in a machine that could contain the explode, you know, but we would never get anywhere if we didn't challenge the assumptions around us. And I think that if we look at the state of science and the state of technology, physics, even fundamental physics over the last 50 years, it has kind of stagnated. Because people in general are not as questioning of, you know, can we really push that envelope a little bit more?
And I see some of it too as interdisciplinary. Not to give away trade secrets here, but it turns out a lot of what you use to build a cell phone is already space grade. So when you're looking to build a CubeSat, there's a wonderful group of professors around the country, but one we talked to early on downstate at U of M. And we were talking about like, oh, for this and that and this, and he's like, yeah, when we build our CubeSats, it's basically a bigger cell phone.
It's a cell phone.
And we talked to an expert from NASA, and we were asking like, oh, you know, we assume it has to be this. He's like, well, with the length of your mission, nah, don't even worry about it, bro. And I couldn't believe it. We gotta have the wrong guy. There's no way. Nope, I looked him up. He is the NASA expert on small sats. And that's the thing of first principles that they're talking to. That's proof in the pudding of you gotta step across. You can't just be in your ivory tower of knowledge. Is you've got to look to your neighbors, see what they're doing. Because you might find that I don't have to build this component. I just go down to Circuit City or wherever and grab it. So that's the amazing thing. I don't even think Radio Shack or Circuit City exist anymore.
No, I think
haven't
they're all
thought
out of
about
business.
Circuit City in a
It's
long time. Memories flooding back.
right?
But that's how fast things move, is that like, no, we can do better. It doesn't always need to be the brick and mortar way of 100 years ago. We can do better today. We just got to keep moving. You can't wait for the horse to grow a set of engines.
Yeah. So you just made two comments there. You mentioned two things, CubeSat, small sat. So maybe that's a good little segue into what the hell you guys are actually doing, right? So I know in general terms, the audience may know if they've heard of you before, there's a bunch of stuff in space. Sometimes it hits each other. When it hits each other, it creates this effect. I can't remember the guy's name. But
Kessler syndrome.
Kepler effect.
Kessler.
Kepler's a different one.
Yep, Kepler's very important, but not
Very important in a different way.
Yes.
I pay very close attention in physics. And it creates this exponentially replicating problem of more and more debris. When I think about satellites, when a lot of people think about satellites, they think about this Sputnik thing, you know, with antennas on it, or maybe the International Space Station. It's a great big thing whizzing around. That's not really the state of satellites today, and it's not really the way. I mean, there is some of that, but we mentioned CubeSats, small sats, and things that are basically a cell phone, and a proliferation of them is happening. More and more and more is going up. Starlink alone is going to send up several thousand satellites.
Starlink sent up 240 last month.
240 last
Right.
month. So, in that space, where is your focus with Kall Morris, and how are you going to attack this problem? How does it work?
I can start.
Go ahead.
I think one thing to understand there, because there's a lot you put on the plate, and I just want to take it one bite at a time, is for everyone to understand just like how the environment is up there. There's great clips in numerous movies, but two of my favorite are WALL-E and Gravity. And in WALL-E, if anyone's familiar with the scene, WALL-E's leaving Earth for the first time, and he goes through, and all these small satellites are just floating next to him, and actually Sputnik rests on his face, and it floats away, and it's cute and adorable, and it makes us all feel warm and fuzzy. And then in Gravity, there's a different perception where you see more orbital debris, where there's a issue that happens, spoiler alert, and things go bad in space, and it goes from bad to worse exponentially. And Adam can go off a little bit on the exponential problem of it, but that's the truth of the matter. Is it's not so much the stuff or where it is, but also the speed. That a small bolt or something the size of your cell phone can be a catastrophic collision that could take out a critical satellite, or even most unfortunately, something that has humans aboard, something that we'd never want to see. And it gets worse. It doesn't just, oh, that was a bad accident, that's terrible. It's now increased the rate and the risk exponentially on. So that's my little part to say to either of you.
And in explaining and understanding exponentials, the unfortunate recent pandemic is a great example where, one person infects two others, and those two infect two others each. And now all of a sudden it's growing at such a rate that one person doesn't account for one, but for thousands. And in orbit, if one object hits another, that scatters off into hundreds or thousands of objects. Each of those objects can hit another and spawn thousands more. And so that's exactly the point, like Troy made, is once it reaches that point, there becomes a phase at which it's no longer possible to send objects up into space without them getting taken out so fast that you can't complete a mission, especially if that mission is something like trying to mitigate the orbital debris problem. If we reach a point where we can't remove debris anymore, we just have to wait till 1,000 years from now when some of it has come down. And that seems a bit dreary. So the plan is to get ahead of that. We're very fortunate in that this is one of those problems that The world is facing that we're aware of it before it's happened. We have the time now, over the next decade, to start working on this and to start solving this problem and prevent it from becoming a crisis. We need to put that effort into it and make that happen. And so that's what we're working towards.
And the crisis would entail, I mean, if people might not understand or fully appreciate why it's important. I mean, I think we all get that there's stuff up there and we need to keep using space, but the crisis and the impact to human existence. If we think about where we are today with everything from global positioning systems to emergency services systems to even the communication of certain parts of the power grid, is all connected through space and through what are actually, we think space is a big place. We just shoot stuff up there forever. It's fine, right? No, because there are only so many usable layers of space around the Earth, right? For things like communication back to terrestrial things. And every year we push more things out that are going to be using those communications, autonomous vehicles, robotics, all kinds of stuff that's happening day to day. So there's an exponentiality, if that's even a word, happening on the planet too, that's going to drive this crisis to an inflection point.
So if I can take the moment to tell the story about that, so like you said, autonomous vehicles, that's a great example of autonomous vehicles. I think we can all accept that someone is working on them. There are innovators out there who are solving this problem, and if they can solve it, I think that's a great thing. I would love to not have to drive anymore, to just get in my car and it takes me where I want to go. That sounds wonderful if it works, and it's up to the innovators for it to work. One of the key infrastructures that they need is for roads and our cities to be autonomous vehicle ready. And one way they've seen to jump over a big expense is put it up in space. It's called like the new GPS, where current GPS just visually is very far away from Earth. It's about halfway to the moon or somewhere around there. It's a big orbit, and so it's able to see everywhere with just a few satellites. But in doing that, it's more of a delay and it's not quite as accurate, and it's why your GPS says turn in 200 feet. Because it doesn't actually know if you're at the turn or not, so it's just giving you a warning. For autonomous vehicles, we need a bit better than that. So they're saying, okay, we'll put up this new GPS, lower in orbit, right in where all the other debris is, but that's fine. There's not too much yet, right? It's manageable still. So we'll put it right there, and then all our autonomous cars will work. And so imagine this future where everyone gets their autonomous cars, they're driving around great, and then space debris knocks out those satellites. Not only do your cars not work anymore, you never built the infrastructure on the ground to enable them. And this sounds kind of sci-fi and kind of crazy, but what I'm actually talking about is a situation going on in Africa right now, where in Africa, they never built phone lines. Because they were able to jump over phone lines and go right to phone towers. And the same thing is now happening with internet. Instead of building internet lines, they're going to get it from the satellites. So you have this thing of, it's great, it's better, it's necessary to put that infrastructure in space to make it happen. But if we lose it, we don't have any plan B. We don't have on the ground the means to still enable that.
Yeah, and this is one of the human tendencies that is so evident over and over again, whether it's the example that you gave in Africa or let's say global warming, is that we don't respond to things until there's a big fat problem staring us in the face. And so maybe that becomes part of your challenge, I would imagine, in getting people like, who cares about this problem? Right. And where's the money in this problem? And actually, who is your customer? So what have you learned in the last year on that roadmap of who cares about this problem? Who's working on this problem? Who's your customer? And what's that been like to try and explore those questions?
I'll take the first part of who cares is everyone you brief on it. I don't know if there's been a conversation we've had from someone involved in automotive marketing to experts in optics that once you break down some of the pieces of how many times faster than the speed of sound a random screw is going in space, people are very quick to run that math like, I don't know the exact equation, but it equals bad. So the nice thing is that people do come to understand the state of the situation. To the level of nuance is up to debate. But a big part of then is the business side of it is you can hardly do most things in this world for charity. You can't do them for long if you are. Yeah. So a big part of it that we've been exploring is that customer basis. And the tragedy of the commons is a buzzword that is used every time anyone's talking about orbital debris. And for those unfamiliar, it's everyone using a public good and no one maintains it. So people respond, well, shouldn't the government? Yes, sorry. Unfortunately, and that's a great example. Yeah. Shouldn't just the government is always a quick knee-jerk answer from anyone of, well, the government. Well, the government's made up of people like you and I and organizations and missions and budgets, and it doesn't go that easy. And we discover that hard way, crawling through grass way, the hard way, that it's not just that easy. Well, it's space, it's global. Maybe it's the UN, maybe, or ESA, or the United States, or NASA. We've led before, we can lead again. But it's really the collaboration between, as well as shifting it forward. That innovation part we were talking about a couple minutes ago, that revolution we're looking at is part of the answer. And that's where we've been looking at with some of our partners that we're in discussions with, is not just grab the stuff and get rid of it. That was a great answer 40 years ago, but what can we do with it? What can we do to take what was danger and now make it an asset? Make it into something that we can use to advance society forward, rather than just, okay, we didn't blow up the satellites today. Good, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
And that's back to your first principles too, because what can we do with this stuff that's up there? And again, to reference Elon, he revolutionized things, or SpaceX did, by saying, wait a minute, do we really have to just throw it away?
Yep.
Or could we land it again and reuse it, shine it up, send it up on another mission? And how many missions can we send a rocket? So, that's great. So any other responses on that?
And kind of the business side of it.
I think you covered it.
Yeah, you really hit the key point of that whole looking beyond just the task that needs to be done to avoid disaster is deorbit debris.
Yep.
But how can we take advantage of that and go further beyond?
Yeah. And how, so in kind of layman's terms, right? So you got these bolts that are hurtling around at some real, let's just say really goddamn fast.
17,000 miles per hour.
17,000 miles per hour. And you are going to take a satellite and shoot it up there and catch that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then take it to a location, an orbital location that is safer, or at least
It got hit, or it has scattered off from whatever collision created it, or things like that. So there's, in addition to the speed factor, there's resolving the tumble and the rotation. And then there comes into a lot of other factors where this is why you don't get a simple answer, Keith.
To explain the non-simple
I mean,
nature.
it sounds like there's a lot of math involved.
Yes.
Do you know math?
Yes.
Yeah. I would think you would need to know some math to figure out all of the various variables that go into launching a satellite up there, approaching a piece of debris, figuring out what angle it's at, how fast it's spinning, and then figuring out how you're going to catch. It's not like you're just a dog catching the ball, like on one of your commercials, right? So, I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I'm sure a lot of others are as well. I know that you've got a satellite design, so that's one piece of it. You've got a plan to get the satellite up there using rideshare programs like SpaceX rideshare, and there's some others that have really significantly reduced the cost to get your satellite up in space. You've got some kind of a genius level AI algorithm that's going to figure out all of the calculations, and then somehow it's all just like magic, right?
Well, in a little bit, and speaking to that, this is kind of the innovation and entrepreneurial spirit, is that we haven't solved every single problem yet. We can't afford to. We're not a large enough team, and we don't have enough people that we can solve absolutely every problem right now. What we focused on is the difference between how are you going to do it and can it be done. As it turns out, if you're really creative with the math and you're really creative with your answers, you can solve can it be done long before how's it going to be done. And that's the key step there, is realizing, because a lot of people assume the answer, since they don't know how to do it, that it can't be done.
Yeah.
And realizing, okay, it can be done. That then validates the effort to figure out how are we going to do it. And so the spacecraft design, the math, all that work being done is all around this design could do it. How is it going to get it done? We got to do a lot of experimenting. We got to do a lot of testing, a lot of innovating, a lot of growth, but we know it can be done. And that's the key insight.
And a lot of that experimentation, at least for now, can be done with I would imagine, computer modeling and taking known facts, all the different bits and pieces of physics that go into
the first principles.
The first principles again. So is that kind of where you guys are now? I know you have a design and you've got a yes, it can be done. And are you at the modeling stage? And then if so, what does the next sort of 6 months to a year look like for you?
So the first answer is yes, that is very well description of where we're at, is the modeling stage. And what comes next is refining the models well enough that it convinces the powers that be, whether it's government or another company that's looking at in-orbit manufacturing or anything like that, to say, all right, we're convinced. it can be done. And that's exactly what we're working on, is working with partners and pushing them towards that point of it can be done. And when they ask us a question, it's either something we have the answer for, or it's something that we say, all right, that's a new angle, let's look at it, let's do the math, do the modeling, and see what happens. And that's the insights that leads to the next step of funding to go forwards.
Cool. And then in parallel to that, we all know about something called client discovery. And we went together about a year ago through an accelerator with the Global Innovation Catalyst Program, one of many different types of accelerators out there. But I think one of the things we all learned was this fundamental, in parallel with your modeling, constantly going out and talking to who those would-be clients are. Who cares about this thing? Who is developing solutions today? What are the problems they're encountering? So is that something that you're doing alongside, kind of day to day?
Yes, and that is a large part that I'm glad you put it in such succinct words, because it's very hard, talking to somebody, catching up with an old friend, they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, talking to other space nerds, but it's important. And that's what's happening, is that we are talking to, innovators in robotics who are, we'd love to do this, but we're running into, a stop point right here. There's a pitfall we can't get past. Okay, then we talk to AI. Then we talk to launch, then we talk to orbital manufacturing, and you start getting these different pieces, parts, and you figure out, well, in this step, you're my customer, but in that next step, it reverses. And that's the really interesting part here, because space is such a hard factor, is that you don't get there alone. You really don't. Even back to Apollo, there's thousands of men and women involved in the project at every single step. And it's still true today. It's just they're not all in one building wearing the same tie and white shirts. So you have to find them a little bit. And that's where we spend a good number of our time, is finding those partners, building with those partners, building the relationship, but also the technical issues of the mission, the technical issues of where is the rubber going to meet the road? When we grab that satellite, is this end effector or not going to twist off and break and create new debris? And that's the part that isn't settled yet. I'm excited for us to come back and tell you, here's what we do, this is how you do it, everyone go get space debris. But that's, again, the Wall-E side of it. That's the space junk. It's so funny, but orbital debris is a little bit harder, and it takes a little bit longer, but it's so worth pursuing.
Yeah, and this is the slog of entrepreneurship and innovation, that, we think, we may have a tendency to think people like Elon Musk just pop up out of nowhere and they're geniuses. Well, he's a pretty smart guy, but he's got thousands and thousands and thousands of smart folks working for him and with him. And collaboration in the innovation economy is so important, because you're slogging through all these questions and all these different viewpoints and experts that you're meeting with. Every time you meet with someone, there's this potential that the collaboration of the two might lead to some really unique and crucially important step. Right, and this is the glorious part about entrepreneurship, right? Is spending, I don't know, what is your life like today? Are you just sitting around watching TV, thinking about when one day you're going to have space debris solved, or how many hours a week are you working and not getting paid?
All of them.
Oh yeah. I was about to say hours of work. Like, you define it. You have a start and stop time. Really, I think this is one thing that I really enjoyed about the innovative aspect, is the fact that I work at all times of the day because I want to. Because it's that acknowledgement that this is exciting work. It's work we're doing not only for ourselves but for the Earth. That's inspiring. Which it's crazy that big corporations paid me a lot of money and offered a lot of benefits just to try me get me in the office for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And now, by giving myself no money and no benefits, I'm in the office for far more, because I want to do that work. It's exciting, it's encouraging, and it needs to be done.
Yeah. No, there's real power and magic in the motivation.
Yeah.
The passion factor when you're
and the aspect you mentioned, Adam, of working all times a day, is that for many people, maybe it's the case, but for me, inspiration doesn't necessarily come just between 9 and 5. So every day is different. When whatever project you're working on, suddenly that thing clicks in your head that you're like, I need to get this down because I just figured out this thing I've been stuck on, and then you get that down. And then you're stuck again, and you go work on something else, because there's so many problems to solve in entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And that is one of the kind of bittersweet parts of it, is you can work whenever you want, which means you work all of the time.
And I look back, because my degree is in psychology, and sometimes when we're going down the bracket here, they're like, how do you fit in? Well, my degree in understudying was in behavior analysis, which, if you dig deeper, is human services and industrial organization. And that's where I start to see these elements of some of my frustration is that we have ways to do life better. It's not like a theoretical. There's books for it. We can go find a professor. He's like 20 minutes away. He's a great guy. Like, it's not an unknown thing. And it just wasn't happening in where we were. The innovation wasn't taking place. And we are doing that here, where there's times where we're not going to spin our wheels for 4 hours on the same problem because we just don't know right now. So we jump to a new, or we talk to a new expert. And it's bringing in that way we think, bringing in first principles from my psychology background into the way that we attack some of these problems, that it really does take things to that next level, is that you do need to attack it as an entrepreneur from a dozen different ways. Because once you find the one that fits, it's beautiful.
Yeah. I think a big part of being an entrepreneur is not really being comfortable, because when you're working with a corporation, you're working in a system that has been running for 10 or 20 years. And whether it's the best form or it's adapting to the new environment, it's still running, it's still operating. You can have comfort in that, at least it's not going to fall apart. For an entrepreneur, every conversation we have is an arena that we bring our ideas to and we say, can these stand up? They don't have 20 years of experience supporting them. They are a new idea. It's a new concept. We've had a ton of people tell us it can't be done. And so put them in the arena with this new expert and say, give us your best shot. Punch the lights out of us. Let us know how it's not going to work, because we'd rather know now than when we're trying it. And especially if you give us the best thing is when the expert gives us the information, gives us the challenge, and then we go and look at it and realize that expert is 5 years in the past. They haven't adapted to the new thing. And that's when you really start to grow as an entrepreneur, as you say, is you challenge yourself every day to be uncomfortable, to be pushing that edge and not just say, hey, we figured it out. Cool, yeah. I can take the week off. We figured it out.
Yeah, in some ways, I mean, it's funny that you bring up comfort, because maybe an essential ingredient to innovation is lack of comfort.
Yes.
And maybe comfort in the corporate sense is illusory, is an illusion. Because, you know, I spent many years feeling like I was in a comfortable position, you know, in terms of my financial safety, in terms of my stability, or at least my perceived stability. But it wasn't a comfortable thing. It was a very uncomfortable thing. There was this dissonance of, gee, I'm misaligned with my purpose. And I think a lot of people experience that. And then if you contrast that with the discomfort of living in a cave and going, well, how can we discover a way to take fire and harness it so that we can go to that other cave and, you know, get better, you know, there's better hunting over there. And discomfort drives innovation and discovery. So I think maybe, although it can be a scary thing to jump off that cliff, it might actually be an essential thing to go and say, no, I'm going to put myself in an uncomfortable setting so that I can be alive and be my best. And yet you're doing it in a place that you really love. Like you said, like innovation doesn't always happen when you're at work. In fact, you know, Einstein, many other people point out the importance of having time in solitude. Walks on the beach, going and doing something in the woods. For some people, it might be that sort of thing. For some people, it might be video games, whatever. And then having that aha moment on that thing that you were working on. Going, okay, I figured it out, you know, in the middle of your video game. Right? So that's, I think there's some really cool wisdom in that. Let's talk really briefly about space aliens. Have you ever seen a UFO?
Not at liberty to discuss that.
Oh yeah, you were working in aerospace.
You know, it's an interesting thing to me, because I've been, you know, ever since the David Fravor experience with Tic Tac, with the Top Gun pilot that engaged with the UFO, and there's some really credible people that are saying, no, we saw this thing and it was defying the laws of physics, and we actually chased it, engaged with it. Whether it's that kind of thing, or whether it's people that are really giving serious thought to what is the likelihood that in the millions and billions of galaxies out there, which each have their own, you know, millions and millions of stars, which all, you know, something like 1 in 8 of those stars has a galaxy or a planetary system much like ours. You know, what do you guys think is the likelihood that we're alone? And where do you stand with that?
The Fermi Paradox is what you're making reference to, and there's a great number of videos out there. I'll count on one of you guys to pronounce the one I'm thinking. Thank you. It's, I believe, German.
Or in a nutshell.
And they do a great video talking about that and many other things. But that's something where the math goes further than our intuition would think. And I think that's the incredible thing, aliens or otherwise, is you have to apply of, well, what is my one recycling can matter? What is my one, you know, growing a garden matter? What is my one looking for this life on another planet matter? it makes a world of difference when A, you talk about exponentialities, and 2, when you're talking at massive numbers. So to answer your question, yes, Troy, I'd like to hang out with you guys. It sounds awesome. But will we see it in our time? Will we even recognize it? When we walk over a worm, we don't recognize it as intelligent life. And we might either do that to another planet, or one whizzes by us and like, oh, you guys still are burning dinosaur bones? Nah, we'll see you in a few thousand years. So who knows? It's exciting to find out.
It is exciting.
4 billion stars in a galaxy, or 400 billion stars in each galaxy, 400 billion galaxies. That's a total number of stars called a septillion. And that's not a number we use in normal day-to-day. That's beyond quintillion, which we also don't use. Like, these just sound strange saying it. So to look at all of that and say, the rest of it is empty, and this is the only place with anything, it's hard to accept that as anything but crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's sort of, even if you think about the human body, it's almost like one cell, and imagine that cell is the only living thing in the human body. And we're actually made up of so many millions of cells and bacterium and all this other stuff, for lack of a more technical term. We're getting towards the end, so I'm going to have to start wrapping it here, but I would like to start down that track with you mentioned Tiny Troy, and I think we're going to have to do a 3D printed little Tiny Troy so that we can,
I still have some of those. I actually found a couple of weeks ago the first spaceman my parents ever bought me that came with a NASA patch, and I still have it, and it sits on my shelf as a reminder.
Yeah.
And like, how often do you actually get to keep that first toy, that first spark of inspiration?
And of all the things that we didn't get to explore today, the one that I don't want to leave out is what each of you would say to the Tiny Troy, the youngster that is out there thinking about the possibilities, whether it's stars or computers or whatever it may be. What do you say to the dreamers, to the kids out there that looks at what's happening in the world and trying to make sense of it all and what they ought to do? What kind of advice would you give to yourself with this now?
The way I got some of the best progress I've ever had, a lot of it was here in Marquette, is ask questions, ask to understand, and when someone says no, say thank you and go find the yes. Now, asking are elves real and can I go visit the Lord of the Rings turns out to be a very big no eventually, until you find out about New Zealand. And down another rabbit path is that ask whatever your passion is. If it's art, it's just as important as science. Without one, we don't really enjoy the other. And so I think whatever your passion is of the day, of the month, of the year, ask your librarian, your teacher, your mentor, your whoever. I want to know more. I want to find out more. I want to do more. And when they say no, thank you. And then turn to the next person. Luckily, we're surrounded in communities. We're very rarely just stuck with one person. We're around a campfire. Turn to the other side and ask, hey, can you help me make a s'more? Sounds delicious.
Yeah, I think asking is a huge thing that growing up, I wish I had done a better job of. And have progressively gotten better. So I like that answer. My add-on to that would be try it. Life is hard. We all know that. Most of the time you fail at things you try at, or at least I do. But if you keep going, you find that thing that works. And that is where success lies, is continuing to go after it. And what's that old quote of, it's not about, what is it? It's not about how hard you get at it, it's about if you get back up and keep going.
Right.
And that to me is so crucial, because you're gonna get knocked down 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times, but if you keep going, you will get there. It takes time, it takes effort, but it happens.
I think for me, speaking very specifically to young Tiny Adam, is you're not smart enough. Because I think the worst times in my life for personal growth and for a sense of comfort and sense of belonging was when I was or thought of myself as the smartest person in the room. When I said, hey, I know everything, I can kick back, knowledge is complete, I know the full answer, nothing more to be done, because that's when I stopped growing. And so now, even though I'm much older and have far more degrees and far more pieces of paper saying I'm educated, if a week goes by that I'm not reading a new research paper or learning a new concept, that's a week wasted, because there's still so much more to know. And I rarely think of any knowledge gained as knowledge wasted.
So the inspirational version of you're not smart enough, not the self-deprecating one. We don't want to beat yourself up. Cool. Well,
you're not smart enough yet.
Gentlemen, yes, exactly. And you never are, really. You can always be a bit smarter and learn some more things. So, gentlemen, I know you have another interview to get off to, and I really appreciate you joining us here today. If you're listening out there or on the replay, you can follow us on YouTube for future Firestarters, Fireside Chat with Firestarters, and we hope to see you soon around the campfire.
Thanks
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us. The view was great.
Yeah, it was wonderful.